나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교 나무 묘호랭개교. Hello, everyone. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. I hope that this finds you healthy and secure. Before we dive into the Gosho, as has become habit, I want to talk a little bit about Nichiren and our practice. The question has come up regarding my oft repeated call out of cultural bias, personal bias in the translations and so forth. And I keep cautioning all of us about that for one very important reason. And I really want to get everyone on the same page here. We know, and I've talked at length about how Shakyamuni himself spent a good amount of time in his teachings explaining, exhorting us to study personally for ourselves. Because each one of us, although generally we may agree on the fundamental concepts of Buddhism, certainly, but how we talk about practicing and how we talk about our particular understanding of certain aspects of Buddhism, well, we're all going to express that differently. We're all going to use language differently. We're all going to have examples for our own minds, our own experience of how to understand certain aspects of Buddhism. And without thinking about it, without building a you might say a propaganda, a teaching method about it, without even thinking any of those kinds of thoughts, we are going to express our particular understanding of the teachings of Shakyamuni and Nichiren through our own particular lens, very honestly, very earnestly to others. And those others are going to hear our experiences through their own filtered experience. And though we may use very similar words with one another, how we understand Buddhism and how we understand how to practice Buddhism, it's a little bit mushy, right? So this is a samsaric problem. And mostly in our day-to-day life, we don't think about this. We're not aware of this. Those of us who are more aware of this, often our speech is affected. Because every time we think about saying something, which word do I use? How do I say this? Blah, blah, blah. Or we just quit altogether. Go, I don't understand. And maybe that's even better. Just chant with me, right? Because that is a definite, direct connection to the experience of Buddha. No words getting in the way. So this is important to understand. This is how we communicate as human beings. And you've heard me talk about this many times in my videos on relationships and communication and so on and so forth, that it's no matter how earnest we are, truthful we are in our hearts and minds to explain and to share our experience with others, we have very little, if any, control of how those words in those particular orders affect you and me. As we communicate, dead earnest, we can inculcate our own experience, which is biased, to others who will hear not the bias, but they will take that as the truth, the communicated, however they experience it. So you see, and I've repeated this several times, there's always been this concern in Buddhism from 3,000 years ago to today, that the true teaching of Shakyamuni may be lost to time, may be lost by very earnest people. I mean, set aside those who have corrupt agendas. We're just talking human nature here. That through the inculcation of little woo-woos here and there that get taken as part of the teachings, begin to take apart the absolute experience of awakening Buddha in our minds. This is such a precious teaching. You could see how that could become a very, very preoccupying concern, right? It is the main driver behind taking what was a verbal teaching, memorization and recitation, singing teaching, and writing it down. But you see, the very act of writing it down has to go through this personal filter. You can write down the words exactly, but as soon as you go from language to language, scholar to scholar, the interpretation, the transliteration itself can easily become problematic. This is why I keep calling out scholarship, scholarship, scholarship. This is nothing I invented. This is just common sense. But I keep repeating it for one very important reason. When Nichiren, as we're noticing in his treatise, right, he wrote letters that were very personal, like to you or to me, about practice. But even if he just a thank you note, right? Many of his letters are just thank you. Thank you for the gift of this and this and this. Just know that I, Nichiren, am not saying thank you, buddy. I needed to eat. He always interprets those in light of awakening, Buddhahood. And he understands as a humble man that the gift that he's received isn't for him. Yeah, it'll sustain him. Yeah, it'll help him survive. But it's not about ego. It's about what he's doing. That's what needs to survive. That's what needs to be fed. That's what needs to be sustained. So Nietzsche constantly, especially in those private notes, explores the idea that understand as the giver, as the supporter, it may look on superficially that I am gaining. But the truth of the matter is that the only thing I have to do with it is my effort to continue to teach, to continue to spread the words of Shakyamuni is so important. We don't want to lose the teaching that your offering is not a gift to me. Your offering is the support, the earnest support of this task that I am performing for Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, for the Lotus Sutra. He reminds us of that constantly, right? But now in his more involved letters that either go to other monk teachers or other lay monks who influence others, he really elaborates the Buddhist side of things with expedient means and explanation, because he understands that's his whole mission. Our practice is a bodhisattva practice. So everything Nichiren does and expects anyone he talks to do is to not only perceive deeply the lessons of Shakyamuni in the self-practice teaching of the Lotus Sutra and throughout, but that the expectation is, with this knowledge, you will become a more effective teacher. When you share your practice with others, you will dig more deeply than your own superficial understanding to then, he gives you the text. He says, use this, do this, share that. And always begin with chanting together. And so, now to my point, these larger documents that he creates, the treatises, the remonstrations, these go out to not only scholars to deeply understand, but non-scholars, government people, people who affect many, many, many people in Japan, right? Not just their local circle. To them, he makes elaborate arguments that cannot be refuted by his competing influences, teachers of other sects and groups. Now, the important thing that I want to point out for this introduction to this video here, when Nichiren calls out Zen teachers or Pure Land teachers or Honen or even Chinese teachers and so forth, and points out their errors, he does two things. Number one, he points out that some of them obviously knew better, but instead of following the words of Shakyamuni, they deviated, and the only reason could be for their own edifice, for their own honor, their positions, their egos. And that's really, really bad. But the other, maybe more subtle side of that is easily missed, and that's why I'm talking about it now, is the ease with which those misinterpretations, whether we can argue what ever the agenda is, but I'm just going back to fundamentals here, that a lot of these teachers learned from their mentors, who learned from their mentors, who learned from their teachings, hundreds of years. And it may have begun simply with a misunderstanding. Not an intentional misunderstanding, but a misunderstanding born of simply not understanding, or a specific understanding that seemed to relate to that person, that monk at that time. And as that monk grew in his influence, or hers, they kept this misunderstanding going in their lives. And as they talked to others, they had planted this false idea without knowing it. And we've just read in the last video where somebody had come around to, right? Genku started out completely convinced of what his teachers had taught him, only to, after assiduous study, and that's the point. This is what Shakyamuni said from the start. Don't just take everything in whole and go. Study, prove for yourself what the merit, the meaning of the words is. You have to do that for yourself. You can't just accept everything whole that somebody else tells you. It may be a starting point. It may be a very good starting point. But only you can dig deep enough to understand from your experience what is valid and what is not. And Nichiren showed in the last video how ultimately Genku backpedaled off of the documents and other things that he had created early in his influence, good on him, and came back to Lotus Sutra. He figured out the truth because he studied for his own practice. Yeah? This is critical to understand. So when you hear me rail about words like holy and faith and those kind of things, this is what I'm pointing out. Don't just accept these words, these translations as correct. Because the usage of language and words is totally affected by the translator, the writer. And you don't know their reasons for using their words, but we've heard them all throughout our life with a ton of baggage assigned to each of those words. They're highly charismatic words. And the charisma and the baggage around those words don't belong in Buddhism. They're complete out-of-field invocation, and it muddies up our understanding. And we can read right over it and go, I know what all that means. But ultimately, it's messing with our minds, our understanding. It's standing in the way. And whether the intention was there from Fuji School, Mount Manobu School, or politicians, I mean, this is the world we live in, right? So all I'm doing is I'm not trying to point the fingers. If fingers are pointing, I'm pointing to you to take responsibility for doing what Shakyamuni taught us, to understand his teachings on their merit, on their own value, their own meaning in each of our experience of life. And if something pops up that doesn't belong there, which of these things does not belong, make sure you remove them, because they are bad filters. They will lead you astray. And that clarity is repeated constantly, not only from Shakyamuni, but Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, Kumarajiva, Tendai, Dengyo, Miao Lo. Nichiren is constantly reminding us about that mechanism throughout the history of Buddhism. Nichiren is just repeating the exhortations of Shakyamuni, and he does it very elegantly, really, by quoting him. How can you say it doesn't mean this when here is Shakyamuni himself talking about it? Doesn't agree with what you're saying. That should raise a huge red flag. The fact that you don't know that you're doing that, is that karmic? Is that ego? Is that intentional? Or is that just ignorance? We all have ignorance. We don't know everything. That's why we want Buddha in our mind, because it sees everything clearly. It is the mechanism for our mind to perceive clearly what is going on. Yeah? So language, the way we transmit information, incredibly important, because we're all samsaric beings. We're attached to ideas. That's just samsara. But when we practice enlightenment, all those ideas need to be put aside. We're looking for the essential, the clarity, right? And so in my way, I'm trying to be vigilant like Nichiren, my mentor, to keep reminding us that all of these distractions and influences, these memes that go around, analyze, be aware of what it is you're saying, and reflexively, when we do that, we become editors of our own language center, our own mechanisms of communication. Wow, I've always said that like it just, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't even think about what it meant. That's just how I said it. Now I realize I've been planting the seeds of misinformation. I have to stop saying it that way, right? We train ourselves. And how does that happen? Through more and more study, more and more reading of the Gosho, reading of Shakyamuni. And we get these aha moments, I call them, right? Our insights. And a lot of them are just about how we communicate. Very, very important. Ultimately, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo is Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. And if you say it wrong, you'll hear it. So it's a very easy one. That's Lotus Sutra. That's self-realization, self-practice. Yeah? So I just wanted to talk about that for a moment, because if you come from an extended background in Buddhism, you will have inculcated a lot of that rhetoric that you never questioned. And now, as we focus deeper and deeper on the Dharma, some of those may be hard to let go of. And yet you must let go of them, because they are distortions affecting people that you influence. That's a big responsibility. It's not just about you, right? We are bodhisattvas. We have to practice the best we possibly can, not only for our own enlightenment, but for our existence to have merit, to have meaning. To truly be bodhisattva is to influence others, our environment. And we have to make sure that influence is absolutely clear. No misunderstandings. Is that a tough row to hoe? Yeah, nobody said this practice was going to be easy. Why do I say these things? Because Nichiren says these things over and over and over and over. So now that we've talked about it, as you read on your own, study on your own, or listen to further videos on this channel, perhaps you'll hear the words a little differently. That's my hope anyway. I hope that explains it. It's a very important concept, but in many ways in language, it may be subtle enough that you don't pick up on it. And I would say, if something strikes you as disagreeable or not completely agreeing with what you think, then you should spend some time studying it and understand more profoundly what it is you think and why it is you think it. And if you're struggling with that, like some of you have done, email me or comment. Some of you are more comfortable emailing me because you don't want other people to get into your thoughts or your arguments. I understand that. That's why I give you my email. But believe me, anything you're struggling with, everyone has struggled with. Maybe not in the same words, maybe not in the same way, maybe with not as much history or baggage, right? But we're all human. That's the one thing we do share. Yeah? All right. How long did that take? Let's continue this Gosho. Besides, Nichiren continues, if Venerable Genshin called the Nembutsu easy practice and the Lotus Sutra difficult practice on the grounds that the Nembutsu is easy to practice, whereas the Lotus Sutra is difficult to practice in daily life, he, a Tendai monk, was against the interpretations of Tendai and Miaolo, founding fathers of the Tendai sect. You see, he's still talking about it. The reason is that Grandmaster Miaolo, in explaining the practice of the Lotus teaching in his, quote, annotations on the Great Concentration and Insight, end quote, which is a writing of Chi, right, Tendai, he did a writing called the Annotations on that teaching, declared that the Lotus Sutra would be easy to practice for the ignorant and slow in the latter age because they would be able to meet universal sage Bodhisattva, the Buddha of many treasures, and Buddhas manifested in various worlds throughout the universe by simply practicing the teaching of the sutra. And what is that in reference to? Our modern times. He's not saying we're stupid. What he's saying is we've been inundated by wave after wave of marketing, mimetics, do what we tell you, buy this new product, this is better than that. We are completely inundated, literally drowning in marketing today. Constant distractions. Not just from marketing on TV and your phone and your computer and your browser. Yeah, all of that. But that very marketing, that very mimetic is being spread through word of mouth. And what is the one thing that human beings want more than anything else? Communion, community, friends, being loved, loving others. And how do we do that? We communicate with our mouths, with our eyes, with our bodies. We are completely enraptured in possessing, in thingness, in ownership. That makes us more and more distant from Buddha. Our minds are completely preoccupied with samsara, with this saha world. So to dare to invoke Buddha in that mind of innumerable distraction, that's quite something. And if you're trying to do it with some old teaching that says, well, first of all, go live up in an aquarium or something, a monastery, how many of you are going to do that? Some of you might try, go live in the wilderness, off-grid, right? But even that, what percentage of you are able to, let alone desirous of doing that? Hell no. I can't live without my car, without my television, without my phone? Are you kidding? Maybe for a week. So that's what he's talking about. In the latter age, to do this requires something that's very direct and very simple. Myoho Renge Kyo. Very direct, very simple. And so this is what, in his annotations, Miaolo is talking about. Without all that gobbledygook, even someone who's that far away from the truth, by doing Lotus Sutra, Myoho Renge Kyo, can immediately experience it. In addition, Miaolo declared, quote, you may recite the Lotus Sutra inattentively. You don't have to meditate or concentrate. With your whole heart, chant to characters of the Lotus Sutra all the time, whether sitting, standing, or walking. End quote. Now that's a powerful statement. And I don't say this often, but I have said before, I've been asked, Can I just whisper the daimoku to myself? Can I just think it? Absolutely. There is no more powerful embodiment of Namu than presenting yourself to an altar where you have the mandala focus to your Gohanzen and achieve your Gohanzen, your internal opening, your opening, your experience of Buddha, than to sit with respect at your altar, focused on Myoho, and chanting in a loud voice, Namu, I am here to experience. Na, I am here and present mentally. Mu, hit me with it. Myoho Renge Kyo. There's nothing more powerful than that. And you will awaken Buddha in your mind. It's without doubt. But it's also effective to take a walk in the trees around the neighborhood and be chanting quietly to yourself, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. I'm witnessing the Buddha in everything. That's also powerful. That also has merit, right? I often chant just to help myself go to sleep at night, with my eyes closed. I don't suggest doing that in front of your mandala, of course. So here Miao is saying that's how fundamental this practice is. Nichiren continues, the aim of this interpretation is solely to save the ignorant in the latter age. The ignorant being people who haven't experienced or continue to experience the Buddha in their mind, in their actual life. The inattentive mind, the mind of distractions, oh boy, don't we live in that era, meaning the mind of an ordinary person engaged in daily routines is contrasted to the, quote, concentrated mind. Right? This is what I've been saying, right? Quote, reciting the Lotus Sutra, end quote, means to recite either the whole 8 facets or just one facet, one character, one phrase, or verse, or the daimoku. It means also to rejoice upon hearing the Lotus Sutra, even for a moment, or the joy of the 50th person who hears the sutra transmitted from one person to the next. Right? This is our bodhisattva practice. How you're influencing the people around you. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. But you know your confidence will wane. And the only way to build our confidence, our resolute mind, is by study. Because when we study, so many things click that we gain stronger and stronger resolute determination to maintain Buddha in our minds. Yeah? Quote, whether sitting, standing, or walking, end quote, means regardless of what you're doing in daily life. Quote, whole heart, end quote, means neither spiritual concentration nor the rationale faculty of the mind. It is the ordinary, inattentive mind, quote, chanting to characters of the Lotus Sutra, end quote, means that each character of the Lotus Sutra, unlike that of any other sutras, contains all the characters of the Buddhist scriptures and the merit of all Buddhas. Now, it's important to realize constantly as we read these letters that Nichiren is saying, it ain't me. I, Nichiren, am not your savior. This is a self-practice. And look at these previous masters from generations, beyond Japan to China, and so forth, all saying very clearly the same thing. not praying to something that's going to happen after you die or some other, right? Look, it's super clear. How can these other misguided thoughts and teachings continue and persist today? They're obviously wrong. These are quotes directly from not only previous bodhisattvas, but Shakyamuni himself. It always comes back to that, right? Facile 8, quote, without opening this sutra, he who believes in the Lotus Sutra reads it at all times without uttering a word, recites various sutras widely, without the Buddha preaching, always listens to the resounding voice of the Buddha, and without complicating shines over the entire Dharma world, end quote. The meaning of this statement is that those who believe in the Lotus Sutra are upholders of this sutra 24 hours a day, even if a person does not hold the 8 facials. That those who believe in the Lotus Sutra are the same as those who continuously read all the Buddhist scriptures every day, hour and second, even if they do not raise their voices in reciting the sutras, that it has already been more than 2,000 years since the passing of the Buddha, whose voice remains in the ears of those who believe in the Lotus Sutra, reminding them every hour and minute that the Buddha has always been in this Saha world, and that without contemplating the doctrine of the 3,000 existences contained in one thought, those who believe in the Lotus Sutra observe all the worlds throughout the universe. And the way I always interpret that is maximal potential. All the realms you can possibly inhabit with whatever your momentum, your karmic stream is, all that is available for you to experience is experienced in that moment of perfect understanding. Myoho Renge Kyo. No filters, right? No delusions. These merits are endowed solely to those who practice the Lotus Sutra. Therefore, those who believe in the Lotus Sutra have the virtue of shining over the Dharma world without intention, reciting all the scriptures of Buddhism without voice, and upholding the 8-faciled Lotus Sutra without touching it. Although they do not chant to the Buddha at the moment of death, do not recite sutras by voice, or enter the exercise hall, is this not 100, 1,000, or 10,000 times easier than chanting the Nembutsu 10 times by followers of the Pure Land Buddhism? A provisional teaching expecting tranquility of mind at the moment of death. Now that's also a very important statement. Not only because of the fallacy of Nembutsu being a story, not a teaching, a story to teach, but not a teaching. But listen to how he ends that sentence. Because everything we've reviewed so far is about afterlife, going to a pure land afterlife, right? That's the rhetoric of these translations. And yet in this translation, expecting tranquility of mind at the moment of death. See, that's still within the boundaries of this life. When you experience death, you're still alive, albeit about to exit, about to exterminate, about to go extinct. No more mind. In those last moments, find release. The Pure Land being an experience of this life, this land, this realm, this world. 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. But why would you want to wait until your last breath to see if maybe? Why wouldn't you do that right now? This is the critical difference. The Lotus Sutra is about experiencing that pure land, that blissful state, that deep, profound understanding of life while you're living it. It baffles me that anyone would choose otherwise. Grandmaster Tendai thus wrote in his Words and Phrases of the Lotus Sutra, Facile 10, quote, "The 18th chapter of the Lotus Sutra is entitled, quote, 'The Merits of Rejoicing Upon Hearing this Sutra,' end quote, because the sutra's merit is superior to all other sutras in every respect," end quote. The Lotus Sutra, more than any other sutra, enlightens those whose capacity to understand is limited because of all the distraction. That's the age we live in, right? Unaware of this, teachers of other sects maintain that only those with superior capacity in understanding can have resolve in the Lotus Sutra. Rebutting this, Grandmaster Miao Lo stated in his annotations on the Words and Phrases of the Lotus Sutra, Facile 10, quote, "Those erroneous teachers probably did not realize that even beginning practitioners can have great merit. They insisted that the Lotus Sutra can be practiced only by those with advanced training, slighting those with little training." Oh, you don't rate. No, that's only for really intense monks who've practiced all the rules and austerities. What? No, that's not how it's been taught. That's not what the Lotus Sutra specifically says. Thus, the 18th chapter shows the great merit of beginning practicers, revealing the excellent merit of this sutra, end quote. It's in the sutra itself. Just read it. Don't let these people misalign your thoughts. Quote, "Revealing the excellent merit of this sutra," end quote, Nichiren says, in this annotation is to show that the Lotus Sutra is superior to such provisional sutras as the Sutra of Meditation on the Buddha of Infinite Life, and has more merit with less practice. It's easier and much more profound, right? It purports to save those with little capacity for understanding. If Venerable Eshin did say that the Lotus Sutra is more difficult than the Nembutsu and has no power to save the ignorant and the stubborn, he would have committed the sin of a heretic rebellious to Tendai and Miao Lo, patriarchs of the Tendai sect, or he may have been one of those, quote, "those erroneous teachers," end quote, referred to above by Miao Lo. According to the three great works of Tendai, Profound Meaning of the Lotus Sutra, Words and Phrases of the Lotus Sutra, and Great Concentration and Insight, and Miao Lo's annotation on them, the Lotus Sutra is to save the ignorant, evil or unknowing ignorant women, right? Pointed that out many times, whom other sutras are unable to save, as well as Ichantika, who are eternally drowned in the sea of life, death, right? The Avicii hell, this life, unenlightened. Yet teachers of other sects who do not know this aim of the Buddha consider the Lotus Sutra either equal to other sutras, good only for much practiced bodhisattvas above the ranks of Shoji and Shoju, or promising Buddhahood to the ignorant merely as a means of encouragement. Oh, you can attain Buddhahood. Just join and make your donations and follow us, and it'll work out. It'll work out. Come on. What does that sound like? Tendai and Miao Lo refuted these erroneous doctrines, declaring that those wandering in the 6 realms of illusion are exactly whom the Lotus Sutra aims to address. It's for us normal human beings, coursing through the world in samsara, Be present and manifest Buddha in your mind, Myoho Renge Kyo, while you're in this realm. And it's that easy. The more you practice, the more the Buddha way, it's called, will manifest throughout your life and affect your environs. Your life will move toward enlightenment every day as you expand the experience of Buddha in your mind, your samsaric mind. And this is the only place it's ever going to happen. It's the only place, the only time space where you have a mind. And Buddhahood is in the mind. It's about attitude and intent. It's about how you perceive this experience of life in its totality. They preached the two doctrines of Shorui seed and Shotai seed, recognizing both merits and demerits of the past as the seeds of Buddhahood. They also declare that those born into the realms of heavenly beings or human beings must have accumulated in the past the merit of keeping the 5 precepts or the 10 virtuous acts, enabling them to become Buddhas. So this is another one of those expedient means. What they're referring to is, once you start to understand what your human, your sentient life is manifest from this apparatus, you begin to understand that this apparatus is a manifestation at the end of a unknowable, unfathomable amount of processes. What are there? Some 37 billion cells in the human body? It's a ridiculous number. And all of those had to come about through a certain process of, from energy to energy states, right? Formation into the stuff of electrons, protons, and so on, and so all the way up to a living cell, a collection of cells, a mononucleic acid, DNA, bone marrow, bones, flesh, organs. All this stuff had to come about in a certain sequence to manifest together as a human form, a sentient being, which then, after all that, could manifest this thing we call a mind, a recorder of experience, an influence to that same experience. It's mind-blowing, right? Truly. And that's what they mean. Must have accumulated in the past the merit of keeping the 5 precepts. In other words, all those previous teachings, those early teachings, were about this concert hall, this apparatus that makes for an experience. This karmic trail of manifestations together, grouping together for more and more complex expressions, manifestations, until an adequate apparatus exists to instantiate self-realization. That's what that means. If Venerable Eshin was opposed to this doctrine of Tendai and Miaolo and considered the Lotus Sutra unsuitable for people in the latter age, he must have been ignorant of his own Tendai sect. That's simple. Whatever his motives were is less important than him not understanding the teachings of Buddhism. However, Genku, who was much confused with this, misunderstood the essential collection concerning rebirth in the Pure Land, influencing others as well. And this is what I started this video about talking about, right? Due to this, his good karma accumulated in the past, Genku was fortunate enough to study the true teaching of the Lotus, but he persuaded people into believing in the expedient Nembutsu. Moreover, he caused them to abandon the true teaching. Is he not an evil teacher? Yeah, because now there's an intent in that bias. And that makes him an enemy of Buddha, right? Buddha for all of us. All right. We're getting close to the end here. The reason why those who had received the seed of Buddhahood in the eternal past have been transmitting the 6 realms, lower states of existence, ever since for as long as 500 dust particle kalpas without attaining Buddhahood, and those who had heard the Lotus Sutra at the time of the great universal wisdom Buddha have been undergoing transmigration in the 6 realms ever since for the 3,000 dust particle kalpa, was because they abandoned the great teaching of the Lotus, seeking refuge instead in expedient and Hinayana sutras preached 40 years or so before the Lotus Sutra. Later, they gave up faith or resolve in those expedient sutras too, and thus have continued to transmigrate through the 6 realms. So using the logic of those very misled teachers, those people will never attain Buddhahood because they refuse to practice the culminating teaching. So that's quite a rebuke, a statement of wake up by Nichiren to the people reading this treatise. Those who slighted and persecuted the never-despising Bodhisattva had to suffer in the hell of incessant suffering for as long as 1,000 kalpas. Now, this is where a lot of people, Buddhist and non-Buddhist, would point to statements like that and say, see, we are reborn in this cycle of birth and death, birth and death. But that is not what that means. You ever sit on a fence waiting for somebody? I've talked about this before. If you sit on a brick fence with the top plate, you can sit there for quite a while waiting for somebody to come out of the house. You can be there 5-10 minutes, reading a book or talking to somebody. And then they come out of the house and you hop off the fence and you go about your way. But if that fence is a picket fence with points on every slat, and you sit on that fence, every second that you sit on that fence will seem indeterminately long. Sit there for 60 seconds and it'll feel like an hour. It'll be torture. It'll be hell. It will be the lower realms. And it will feel eternal. That's what that means. The hell of incessant suffering is this lower realms of life that refuse enlightenment. Do you see? But if you practice as a bodhisattva, enlightening Buddha in your mind, Lotus Sutra, time goes by quickly. So quickly, in fact, that you want to stay focused on Buddha because you don't want to miss a second of it. Yeah? Those who slighted and persecuted the never-despising Bodhisattva, the story in the Lotus Sutra, and who to suffer in the hell of incessant suffering, Saha world, life, for as long as 1,000 kalpas, because it'll feel eternal. This was from the sin or the errors of believing in evil propagators of expedient teachings and slandering the propagation of the true teaching. Genku not only discarded the true teaching and sought refuge in an expedient teaching, but he also persuaded others into forsaking the true sutra, putting their resolve in expedient sutras and dissuading followers of expedient sutras from switching to the true sutras. Wow, we have huge examples of that today, don't we? Using the name of Nichiren to do so. Moreover, Genku despised the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra. Is not his error of slandering the true Dharma serious enough to drown him in the hell of incessant suffering forever? And yet, even so, in the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni says, if all he does for a moment, this person, change his mind, hears the Daimoku, the Lotus Sutra, the recitation, and embraces it, just for a moment, Buddhahood is certain. That's how amazing this sutra is, this self-practice is. But you must take resolve. Know it to be true. And it doesn't take much effort when you accomplish it. When you do it, you know it. Right? It's not a choice so much as it is an inspiration. Look, well, I've said these kind of things before. You can know everything there is to know mathematically about jumping out of a plane with a parachute. You can watch endless videos about it from different angles, from the ground, from a head, a GoPro, from the parachute. Yet you will never know what it's like to do it until you do it. Your experience will be so incredibly profound, and it will be your experience, not someone else's. That's when you know. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying? Words. All right, so let's finish this. Forever. Okay, next question. The commentary on the 10 stages by Nagarjuna is a general commentary on all Buddha's teachings during his lifetime, dividing them into hard to practice, easy to practice. Why do you say that the Lotus Sutra, Shingon Sutras, and the Nirvana Sutra are not included in one of these ways? So, that's what you have to look forward to. For today, I hope that some of this reached one of those aha moments for you, or maybe several. I hope there was enough meat in this to create some deeper insights for you, even things to take to your mandala and use your Buddha in your mind to sift through it and attain whatever it is that you need to attain in order to build your Buddha way in your daily life. Coursing as a bodhisattva, right? Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for liking and subscribing. It really, really adds to the algorithms, the opportunity to spread this teaching, to get more and more involved with our environment. And our Sangha is worldwide. So our practice, huge, right? We're not just a regional little group. Let's increase that. Let's influence more and more of the world. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Super grateful for your participation. Visit Patreon. Become one of the sub-group within our Sangha that's doing tremendous work, offering to the Lotus Sutra for the continuation of this Sangha, the teachings, these videos, the website, the bookstore, the Gohonzon store. It's all because of this support. I'm doing my best to keep up with it. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye for now.